I'd like to call to order this Planning and Development Committee meeting and extend a welcome to our viewers online this morning. The first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind you of your responsibility to do so. You do so now or when it arises on the agenda. None declared. Then we have 4 action items. The first one is the Saugeen Shores Official Plan Amendment number 8-16.44. Go ahead, Chris.
The approval of a local plan amendment, and as you know, the approval of local plan amendments has been delegated by the minister to the committee. And in this case, for local plan amendment, the public meeting has already been held, the statutory required public meeting at the municipality. And as a result of that, there was a report given at the local meeting by the planning staff, and additionally took into consideration comments from members of the public and discussion by council. The purpose of the amendment is to redesignate a piece of property from shoreline residential to allow for the creation of some new building lots, and also adjust the environmental hazard mapping on the property to create room for the actual building envelopes on the property. There's additionally a zoning application that's associated with the proposal, and the amendment has been approved as well, with the last day of appeal being in February. There's a copy of a land use map that shows the subject lands. Based on the review, there's a recommendation in the staff report that amendment number 8 be approved.
Thank you, Chris. There's a recommendation to move, moved by Mitch, seconded. Seconder? Paul, any discussion on the recommendation? If not, then all in favor? That's carried. The next item on the agenda then is South Bruce Official Plan Amendment number 13-16.01.
Amendment number 13 is an attempt by the proponent and the landowner to create some space for new light industrial growth within the urban area. The actual amendment itself redesignates a portion of the land to light industrial with exceptions. In addition to that, there's been a zoning amendment passed by the local municipality that implements the permitted uses within the local plan amendment. A portion of the land still remain future development. And there's additional associated amendment with this that also was involved in a boundary adjustment to take some lands out of the urban envelope and designate them back as agriculture. The amendment, again, has been approved. The public meeting has been held. There were some objections from a neighboring property owner, and the concern from the neighboring property owner is the impact of the industrial use on agricultural land, so on and so forth. And one of the things about the amendment in limiting, the surrounding land uses are mixed. There is agricultural land, but also residential subdivision in very close proximity to the property as well. So there's a feeling in the staff recommendation, and also supported by local council, that this is an appropriate location for light industrial use. The amendment does have some limits that are supported by the municipality, sort of prohibiting heavy industrial use, which helps to satisfy some of the concerns from the surrounding property owners in the area. So a recommendation that the local plan amendment is good planning and in the public interest, and a recommendation for this panel to approve the local amendment.
Thank you, Chris. So we have a recommendation. We need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Dan, seconded by Robert. Any discussion on the motion? If not, then all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. The next item on the agenda, or action item, is Environics Analytics License Extension.
This a couple of years back, we entered into an agreement with the Regional Tourism Organization, so the RTO corporate plus Grey County and Simcoe County, and it was for the a license agreement through a company called Environics. And Environics is a company that provides data to municipalities or private companies, and also a number of different tools within that package that allows you to do projections and so on. And also for marketing purposes, it allows you to zero into neighborhoods and ostensibly by postal code and find out the characteristics of people who live within those postal codes. They use a number of factors. I guess it would be called a multivariate analysis to pump out different numbers. A whole bunch of things go into that pile in terms of census information, building permit activity assessment roles, again, demographics, and so on and so forth. So we bought the license, try to test it out, and some of the work that we're undertaking in-house, and the license is held by one of the staff members in the corporate policy division. And we tried to, one of the challenges of our division was to start doing work broader for the corporation just outside of our own division. And so as part of that, we were doing some work for of course, for the library. I'm just trying to find the actual report. I'm clicking around, sorry. C2C. There you go. And so you'll see in the report in outcomes and impacts for Adventure Passport. So again, we're able to drill down people who submit their passports back into us have the postal code associated with it, so we can find out what types of neighborhoods those people live in, and then find out some demographic profiles about them in terms of their spending patterns, their age, family, household size, and so on and so forth. And then that allows us to target our marketing activities through the Adventure Passport to those groups, and that's been completed and has been successful. We've been working with library in terms of their membership to get a profile in terms of the types of members, why do they come to the library, their behaviors, habits, and so on, social values. And this allows us then to target funding through the libraries to make it more relevant for the people who come to the library and would like to see new services provided to those groups. We did a report for council looking at the federal budget, and that was sort of interesting because we were able to take a lot of the, there's a lot of tax measures in that federal budget and sort of shifting around the share of who pays what taxes. And so we were able to drill down then in terms of income in Bruce County and find out what it would mean for residents within the county in terms of some of those shifts, and able to do a predictive model looking at impact for our ratepayers. Some of the other ones we're working on with regard to the nuclear program, able to determine generally where people live in a general sense, and that comes in to be helpful when we're looking at things such as schools and school closures as well. And again, it's been a help with regard to the Business Enterprise Center in terms of residential profiles for the project, and the Business to Bruce project as well. So if you go into, you can actually go to the Environics website and type in your postal code, and it'll kind of tell you who you are, what group you fit into. And of course I tried it, and it was, for some reason, was bang on. I don't know why, and I don't know if they call me an urban cowboy or some similar term, but they, if you look at the PRISM market segmentation, the picture is not all that great. But again, it breaks it down in terms of the types of activities by family size, social characteristics, what you watch on TV, and so on and so forth. So, and there's a profile of backcountry families, again, useful for marketing for outdoor nature experience and so on. So, being a long story short, it's been very, the license has been very helpful in terms of the data. The tools provided have been great in terms of helping us implement some of the programs. And there's a recommendation in the report that we extend our partnership agreement with RTO for the license for another 12 months and continue to evaluate it as we go.
Thank you, Chris. So we do have a staff recommendation. I'll take a mover and a seconder. Mitch? Paul? Any discussion? Interesting how much they can find out about you in subtle ways.
Profoundly interesting, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Frightening, really. Any case, all in favor? Vote, that's carried. So, one more action item, and that's recommendation for refusal of B 78-16-26 Bonnyfield.
Okay, thank you. And this one maybe bears a little bit of discussion just in terms of how we got here. And it's normally the case really where if a county approves a plan amendment and then the local municipality approves the zoning, and this is for a surplus farm dwelling, then the way is cleared for the consent application. The consent really just naturally follows that. If the policy is in place and the zoning is in place, no issue, no problem. So this is one where the Bonfield came before this committee and were seeking exemptions, which the committee had granted because they didn't meet the requirement as a bona fide farmer in the county plan, nor were they consolidating holdings. So that was approved. Goes out, and no appeals on the plan amendment. There was a recommendation then back to the to Kincardine Council on the zoning, and Kincard Council refused the zoning, and so we have a situation from a policy perspective at the county level. It's been cleared, but at the local level, there's no zoning in place, and so then what needs to happen, I think, to facilitate fairness for the applicant. Somebody needs to deal with the consent application, because if Bonfield decides to appeal the refusal of the zoning, then the board's dealing with the consent at the same time. There's nothing worse than dealing with the plan amendment and the zoning at the board, and then having the consent application up in the air where it could be approved or it could be refused. So essentially, the issue here is that because the zoning failed, there's no restriction on the backland, because it's the zoning that implements the county policy that the backland is restricted for further development. So there's a clause on it, right? No, you can't build a house. So technically, I'm sitting back as the staff approval authority, which I can approve routine severances, and I'm thinking to myself, well, there's nothing to implement the restriction on the backland in the absence of the zoning. So the decision from this committee needs to be that we simply refuse the consent. If it goes to the board, I would think if the board approved the zoning, I would think they would routinely, there's really no issue with the consent, it's more so the zoning. So if they all go as one package, I would think it would be a rubber stamp type approval of the board of the consent. Similarly, if this council refused the consent on the basis that it doesn't have zoning in effect, again, same thing, it goes to the board. The Bonfield, if they decide to appeal the zoning, would also appeal the consent application. So either way, by the committee dealing with it, it provides a mechanism where it gets before the board and can be dealt with at the same time as the zoning, so they don't have to come back and ask for approval after the board decision. On the basis, the recommendation is simply refuse it. Because it lacks the zoning. However, if the committee was compelled to approve it, it's simply a case whereby the approval sheet says it comes into force and effect, subject to the zoning coming into force and effect. So either way, again, it gets it before the board, and there'll be a decision made on the consent at the same time as the zoning amendment. I don't know if that's clear. Hopefully.
Chris, what was the rationale for the refusal of the zoning? Did they give?
Well, as a staff member, I can't speak on behalf of council. It was one where the staff recommendation is that there's no issue with the county policy. The county plan has been the amendment's been approved, but there's still a feeling that it conflicts with the other policy. In the PPS requiring it to be a result of a consolidation, because that was the policy. So we're, as a staff member, it's a different jurisdiction, simply making that recommendation. There was a discussion around the council on a whole bunch of issues regarding, the discussion was around under what circumstances, if ever, do you waive the requirement that a person actually be a farmer in order to get the break under the consent policies. So the county consent policies and the provincial policy is set up that we want to have large blocks in the countryside. We don't want to have any residential uses. And then it goes and it says, save and except for one thing. And that's if there's, if a residence becomes surplus to agriculture as a result of consolidation, then you can create that residential lot. So there was some discussion around that idea as why you would go down this road if there's no evidence that there was consolidation or the person was a farmer. But I can't speak on behalf of council, but that was just some of the discussion around the table.
So you're suggesting, your recommendation here is that we refuse the consent application, Chris, and that way it gets before the board.
It's before the board. You almost need to, it's an opportunity, I guess, for this council to signify, in some sense, their desire and veracity that this should be approved. If there's a very, very strong feeling that despite the local municipality not wanting it, that the county should still pursue it as a matter of policy, then on that basis you would approve it with a statement that it comes into effect subject to the zoning being in effect. If there's a general feeling that we set the policy but at the local level it's not acceptable, and therefore we should not be granting the consent, then it would be a refusal.
Well, I have a little problem going against the local municipalities, so maybe we do have to look at this from a policy perspective, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's worthy of that. And then we know, well, I guess we know exactly where we're at now, because with our own policy, right? Because your recommendation for the amendment was based on our policy, right?
Our recommendation was based on this idea that there is the overall intent of the plan to permit farming and not have lots. But there was one thing that said, here's the exception. And when I recommended refusal, or staff recommended refusal of it, is that in the absence of the person being a bona fide farmer, or there being a consolidation, it makes no sense to grant the surplus farm dwelling. It was more around that kind of aspect.
So
but then there's the other argument. The other argument is a compelling argument too, and it could be made, is that it doesn't matter whether you're a bona fide farmer or not, because the backland is going to be sterilized. It's going to end up in the hands of a farmer, regardless, because it could be put to no other use. So it becomes one of, one way to look at it is the intent of the plan was to grant the exemption under very limited circumstances. And although the impact in the end might be the same, that is just, it would not be logical to depart from the plan. Is kind of the thinking at the county level through the staff report, and I think similar argument to the local municipality. But I think that, and again, not to speak on behalf of council when it was dealt with here, but there was a feeling that potentially this is a different type of business model that offers different options to farmers. And in the end, maybe it should not be prohibited.
Just one other question. Is our when we go to the board, is our policy clear from the direction that the recommendation, original recommendation, the plan amendment? And I had trouble following your conversation there a little bit, but does that follow our policy, or is that sort of your preference?
No, nothing with that. They came and changed. They made an application to change the policy.
Yes, okay.
And then so fairly that this committee would consider whether they wanted to depart from it. Okay. And on balance, this committee weighed it and said, well, yes, maybe we should depart from the policy, which you can do. And this is why they have, people can apply for amendments all the time. You can amend your plan, it's your policy. A private person could amend the plan, it's yours. So there's nothing, everything was there as it should have been. This council made the decision, we'll grant the exemption on that basis. But then there was a feeling at the local level that no, it was just a different perspective. So there's two different perspectives brought to the table, and with both of them having merit from a land use perspective and from an economic perspective and the rest of it. There just seems to be that difference. So I think that potentially, again, this is how council looks at this, is that there's no zoning in place. You know, the local municipality disagrees with the perspective from county council, and so it's just really a judgment call in terms of what you do with this. And again, either way, it's the consent is a technicality that needs to end up at the board with the other applications, because if they decide on the policy basis and the zoning basis, then this just simply implements the other two applications.
I'm struggling with it. I, like you, I certainly would like to respect what Kincardine, what their thoughts are. But in the same breath, I think we have we have a responsibility there to speak what we think is right. And I still support the idea, because I think this is really where farming is going to be going, these types of things. It's an innovation of what we have never dreamed of, that the plant had never dreamed of 5 years ago. And we're not very good in planning an innovation in these types of things. We fall behind those all the time. And you're going to see more and more of this, because this is where farming is going. So, in an effort to preserve those buildings, I think it's, I still support the original application. I'm stuck around this, and I really don't care what, I would see if we refuse it, that we're kind of making the decision for the board a little easier. And I really don't care about that. I mean, they can take this wasn't appealed, was it?
No.
No, so we're here. I'd be fine with making it conditional on receiving the proper zoning from the Kincardine. It just throws it back in their court, and then it's one issue, but I think what it does say is that we think there's an issue around these types of severances, and yeah. Mitch?
I recall the conversation that we had with Mayor Eadie, and I think Kincardine's concerns from day one was the definition of bona fide farmer, and I think this was brought up by Mayor Eadie, that what is the definition of a bona fide farmer? And I know we had that discussion about corporations coming in. They are bona fide farmers. And so I struggled with this when I read it too, because then you're going against what the local municipality is saying, but at the end of the day, by refusing, this is going to the OMB, in my opinion, any way it goes. It will be, the corporation's going to take Kincardine to task, as far as I'm concerned. It's one of those no-win situations. So by refusing it, that's going against our county policy, as far as I'm concerned. Is that not correct?
Yeah, you've made there's an argument to be made. You've set the policy direction, and despite the fact that there's not a regulation in place that supports it, that you feel there's an obligation to see it through to the end, and it's a fair argument to be made. And just, and not to go down the rabbit hole on the corporation side of it, but we do have almost everybody who applies for a surplus farm dwelling is a corporation. And some of them are very big, and some of them are just, brother-in-law, right? But I mean, so it's not an issue, because corporations qualify all the time as bona fide farmers, but there's some evidence that they farm somewhere, right? They're somehow involved in that, and they're somehow consolidating their holdings. And in the absence of that, and so I think it'd be an interesting board hearing, because the scope of it is really just limited to the county plan is in force and effect. They can't go behind that, and the amendments in force and effect. You can't go behind that. It's an issue of really this provincial requirement, then, that it be a result of a farm consolidation, and there's no evidence. So again, it's really a decision on behalf of this committee in terms of how they wish to proceed. The recommendation is for refusal, but again, there is a decision sheet that is available, as we have to have it available for the meeting, that does have a provision that it comes into force and effect subject to the zoning. So that in some ways provides some assurance back to the municipality that the zoning needs to be there for it to happen. Yeah, the clock sort of stops if it's appealed, and then if it goes to the board, then you're okay with that.
So, what do you want to do? You want to speak, Paul? Go ahead.
I guess I just need a little bit of clarification. I'm a little bit unclear on this, I must admit that. So if I understand what you're saying, Chris, is if we approve the severance, then the applicant, because the zoning wasn't changed, the new owner of the land can construct another set of buildings on that, on the farm property. Is that what the issue is?
Well, no, I mean, yeah, no, not really. There is no issue. There is no issue other than there's no zoning in effect to place the restriction on the backland, and so that's a requirement. You didn't waive that requirement when you passed the amendment, so it's still there. And nor would they ask to, because they assume the zoning would be in effect.
Yeah, Mike suggested it's subject to zoning.
Well, I support the severance as long as there's not another set of buildings can be built on the backland, and I guess I'm hearing so far they can.
If you support the severance, as long as there's not another set of buildings in the back, then what you want to support is that the consent be approved subject to the condition that the zoning be in effect.
So,
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
see where it goes. Yep.
Excuse me. So for clarity, what we're saying is we're approving the consent subject to the property receiving the proper zoning from municipality of Kincardine. Maybe we should deal with that first then. So,
Okay.
okay, moved by Mitch, seconded by Milt. Any discussion on it? Then all in favor? Opposed? Okay, that fails. So now we'll go back to Milt's. Are we clear on that then?
Yeah.
So any further discussion on it? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. It's the last of the action items. Next, we have two information items, and the first is the South Bruce Peninsula Official Plan Amendment number 30. Yep.
Okay. Just for information item, and this is in relation to the town of South Bruce Peninsula, and you require there was actually two amendments, one to the county plan to expand the boundary of the Wyerton settlement area, and additionally there was a local plan amendment as well. And so we are aware that the application has been approved by Sparlings. And there was, I don't know if the request came from either the board or town staff. I think it was a response to the town asking what the involvement of the county would be in relation to the hearing. So in terms of, I just provide this for an information report, and this is just general procedure within our division. If there's an application generated at the local level, and does not appear, in my opinion, to be a county-wide interest, such as a major change to a policy in a county official plan, then we don't generally provide representation at the board in terms of hiring legal staff. As you are aware, our legal budget is somewhat limited. Having said that, usually when there's appeal, we would be, if there's a request from the municipality that we attend as expert witness, we would do that. If it's a situation where there's a conflict between a proponent or a landowner in the municipality, and we gave a recommendation, for example, in support of an application, and it was refused by a municipality, then we would only appear if we were compelled to do so by the proponent. So the proponent downloads a summons to compel a named person to appear at the board, and then simply that person would attend and usually provide the same information that was provided to council at the time of the decision. So.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions on that? Comments to it? Sure, go ahead.
I just want to add that I think this issue is going to be resolved, and I don't think it's going to actually go to the OMB. I sat down with all parties and we kind of came to an agreement. So once that's official, that'll become public, but at this point I think this issue will go away.
Thank you. Any further comments? If not, then we have one other information item. It's Blue Water Angel Investment Group.
Turn that over to Kara, please.
And I think Kara's going to give us a...
Okay,
Welcome, Kara.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. We had a presentation a few weeks ago, and a formal announcement was made at the beginning of February that the Blue Water Angel Investors Group has formally formed, and that is for Grey and Bruce counties. So this is a group right now that has about 15 angel investors. There are 2 volunteer coordinators that have donated their time to helping the organization get up and running. And they're looking at hopefully around a couple of years before that group is really formally set. And the report contains some of the examples of what the angel investors are able to do in other communities where they are in place. But they do support local entrepreneurs that are getting up and running. It's not so much startup as it is expansion of businesses. So they're really looking to help, the majority of them are looking to help businesses that want to expand or take that next step to growth. So again, the group is formed. There's 15 investors right now. The group would like to get about 20 to 22 investors. So if you know of anyone that may be interested in being an angel investor, they can go to the Blue Water Angel Investors website, and there's the criteria are there and the application is there. But they're looking at getting several more angels, specifically from Bruce County. So those 15 right now are from Grey County, and they're not worried about the borders with the group, but they would like to see some Bruce County representation around the table. And they're hoping within the next 6 months to at least have 2 entrepreneurs that they've helped out. So that's what their goal for them over the next 6 months, and then they'll sort of evaluate and report back where they're at. So it really is a good news story for us. This is a great opportunity for both Grey and Bruce counties to get some added support for our local entrepreneurs that are looking to expand. Thank you.
No, then if not, then the next item on the agenda is a closed meeting, and the motion is that the committee move into closed meeting pursuant to section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act relating to a personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Moved by Mitch, seconded by Milt. All in favor? We're in closed.